Day 1. The arrival. I woke up to the taste of salt and sand in my mouth. My lungs burned like I'd swallowed fire, and every breath felt like broken glass scraping through my chest. The sun hammered down on my back, and for a long moment I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten here. Then it all came rushing back. The yacht. The storm. The moment the mast snapped and came crashing down. Sarah's scream cutting through the wind and rain. The freezing black water closing over my head. Sarah. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the way my vision spun and my legs threatened to buckle. The beach stretched out before me, a perfect crescent of white sand bordered by dark jungle on one side and endless ocean on the other. Empty. Completely empty. Sarah. My voice came out as a rasp, barely audible over the crash of waves. I cupped my hands around my mouth and tried again, louder this time. Sarah, can you hear me? Nothing. Just the monotonous rhythm of the surf and the distant cry of seabirds. I forced myself to walk the length of the beach, my waterlogged sneakers squelching with each step. Debris from the yacht littered the sand. A life jacket, pieces of fiberglass, a soaked paperback novel with its pages fused together. But no Sarah, no other survivors. Just me. The sun was already starting its descent toward the horizon when I finally accepted the truth. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And night was coming. I needed shelter, I needed water, I needed to think. The jungle seemed to watch me as I approached it. Dense and impenetrable. Vines hung like serpents from massive trees, whose canopy blocked out most of the dying light. Every survival show I'd ever watched told me to stay near the beach, to make myself visible for rescue. But something about the approaching darkness made me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. I gathered what I could from the beach, the life jacket, some rope tangled around a piece of debris, a plastic bottle that had washed up. Not much, but it was something. I found a spot where the jungle met the beach, where thick palm fronds created a natural canopy. It wasn't much, but it would keep the dew off me. As I arranged the life jacket as a makeshift pillow, the sun touched the horizon. The sky exploded into shades of orange and red, beautiful and terrible. And that's when I heard it for the first time. A sound that wasn't the ocean, wasn't the wind, wasn't any animal I'd ever heard. It started low, almost subsonic, a rumble that I felt in my chest before I actually heard it. Then it rose into something between a howl and a roar, echoing across the water from somewhere I couldn't see. Every hair on my body stood up. That wasn't a normal animal sound, that was something else entirely. I pressed myself back against the tree trunk, heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The sound came again, closer this time. Definitely closer. The last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon and darkness fell like a curtain. In that moment between day and night, I saw something move at the edge of the water. Something large. Something that shouldn't exist. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat with my back against the tree, clutching a sharp piece of driftwood like it could protect me from whatever was out there. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to move with purpose. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I was still alive, exhausted, terrified, but alive. Day 2. Discovery. The morning sun felt like a benediction. In the clear light of day, the terror of the previous night seemed almost foolish. Almost. But I couldn't shake the memory of that sound, or the shape I'd seen moving in the water. I needed to explore. I needed to understand where I was and what resources were available. Most importantly, I needed to find water. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my lips were already starting to crack. I walked along the beach, keeping the ocean to my right. The island wasn't large. It took me less than an hour to make a complete circuit. A small strip of beach surrounded by thick jungle with rocky outcroppings on the northern end. No signs of habitation, no boats, no rescue. But I did find something. In the jungle about 50 yards from where I'd spent the night, I discovered a small clearing, and in that clearing stood the remnants of a camp, a tent, collapsed and half-rotted by rain and time, a rusty cooler, a backpack hanging from a tree branch, placed there deliberately to keep it away from moisture and animals. Someone had been here before me, someone had survived here or tried to. My hands trembled as I opened the cooler. Inside I found bottles, plastic water bottles that had somehow remained sealed. The liquid inside was slightly yellow, probably not safe to drink, but I also found something better. A water filtration straw, the kind hikers use. And wrapped in plastic, a small survival kit containing matches, fishing line, hooks, and a pocket knife. "Thank you," I whispered to whoever had left these supplies. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The backpack contained more treasures, clothes that were musty but intact, a solar-powered flashlight, a journal with water-damaged pages, and photographs. 3 of them, protected in a plastic sleeve. The photos showed a family, a man, a woman, and a young boy all smiling on this very beach. The last photo was different. It showed the woman alone, looking haggard and afraid, standing near the tree line, and in the background, barely visible in the fading light, 2 points of light. Eyes. Reflecting the camera flash. My blood ran cold. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "It hunts at sunset." I spent the rest of the day in a frenzy of activity, partly to stay busy, and partly because I now understood that I needed to be prepared before nightfall. I used the knife to cut palm fronds and created a better shelter, more enclosed and hidden. I caught rainwater in the plastic bottles. I fashioned a spear from a straight branch, sharpening one end with the knife until it was viciously pointed. And I read the journal. The entries were sporadic, written over the course of 3 months. The family, Mark, Jennifer, and their son Tommy, had been on a sailing trip when a storm destroyed their boat. They'd made it to the island with some supplies. For the first week, the father wrote about hope, about rescue, about keeping spirits up. Then the entries changed. Day 8, something took our food while we slept. We heard it but couldn't see it. Tommy says he saw someone standing at the edge of the trees, but when we looked, nothing was there. Day 12, it came again last night. Jennifer saw it this time. She won't stop crying. She says it's not human. She says it walked out of the ocean. Day 19, Tommy is missing. We woke up and he was gone, just gone. His shoes are still here. We found marks in the sand, like something dragged him toward the water. I'm going to find him. I'm going to bring him back. The entries ended there. I checked the date on the last entry. 3 years ago. 3 years. And no one had come to rescue them. No one had found them. No one except me. The sun was getting lower. I could feel it without even looking, could sense the approach of darkness like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I gathered everything I thought might be useful and retreated to my shelter. I placed the spear within easy reach. I tested the flashlight. The battery was low, but it still worked. And I waited. The sound came exactly as the sun touched the horizon, that same rumbling roar, but this time I was listening for it. This time, I was ready. Except you're never really ready for something like that. It emerged from the water, just as full darkness fell. I saw it in the last rays of twilight, a shape that was wrong, that my brain couldn't quite process. Roughly humanoid, but larger, much larger, maybe 8 feet tall. Its skin seemed to glisten, dark and scaled. Its arms were too long, ending in hands that were more claw than finger. But it was the eyes that paralyzed me with fear. They glowed with their own light, a sickly yellow-green that cut through the darkness like searchlights. The creature moved along the beach with disturbing grace, its head swiveling back and forth as if searching for something. For me, I realized, it was hunting. I pressed myself back into my shelter, barely breathing, the spear clutched in shaking hands. The creature passed within 20 feet of me, so close I could smell it, a reek of salt and rot and something else. Something chemical that made my eyes water. It paused, sniffed the air, turned those awful glowing eyes in my direction. I bit down on my fist to keep from screaming. For what felt like an eternity, we stayed frozen like that. Me hiding in my pathetic shelter, it standing there, testing the air, deciding. Then, slowly, it turned away and continued down the beach, that terrible roar echoing across the water. I didn't move for hours after it left. I barely breathed. Only when the first light of dawn began to paint the sky did I finally allow myself to relax, just a little. I was still alive. Day 2, and I was still alive. Day 5. Adaptation. The days fell into a brutal routine. Sunrise meant safety, meant I could forage and explore and try to improve my chances of survival. Sunset meant terror, meant hiding and praying the creature wouldn't find me. I learned its patterns. It emerged from the water shortly after sunset, hunted through the night, and returned to the ocean before dawn. Sometimes it roared. Sometimes it moved in absolute silence, which was somehow worse. It seemed to be searching the island systematically, and each night it came closer to discovering my shelter. I needed a better plan. Using the journal as a guide, I explored more of the island. I found the graves on day 4, 3 mounds of rocks and sand near the center of the jungle. Mark, Jennifer, Tommy, a whole family, claimed by this island and whatever lived in its waters. I also found their backup camp, deeper in the jungle where the canopy was thickest. They'd built a platform in the trees, about 15 feet off the ground. Smart. If the creature hunted primarily at ground level, height might provide safety. I spent day 5 improving the platform, using rope and vines to create a more secure structure. I moved some of my supplies there, creating a backup location in case my beach shelter was compromised. That night, the creature came straight to my beach shelter. I'd already climbed up to the tree platform by then, guided by some instinct I couldn't name. From my perch, I watched as that massive shape moved through my camp, scattering my carefully arranged supplies, sniffing at the places where I'd been. It knew. It knew I was here. It was only a matter of time before it found me. The creature lifted its head and roared, and in that sound I heard something that terrified me more than anything else. Not mindless animal rage. Not simple hunger. Intelligence, purpose, hunt. Day 9 contact. I found the boat on day 9, or what was left of it. It was another yacht smaller than the one I'd been on, wedged between rocks on the northern end of the island. The hull was breached, and everything inside was waterlogged and ruined. But there were supplies, an emergency radio that didn't work, more rope, a flare gun with 2 flares. 2 chances. 2 chances to signal for help if I saw a plane or another boat. I also found bodies, 2 of them still strapped into their life jackets, floating in the flooded cabin. I couldn't bring myself to look at their faces, couldn't handle seeing the fear that must have been frozen there in their final moments. But I searched them anyway, feeling like a grave robber but knowing that their supplies might mean the difference between my survival and death. A waterproof bag yielded more treasure. Energy bars still sealed, a full water bottle, a laminated map showing shipping lanes. We were miles off any regular route. And a letter addressed to someone named Emily. I didn't read it. Some things are sacred. I was dragging my haul back to camp when I heard voices. I froze, unable to believe my ears. After 9 days of hearing nothing but wind and water and that terrible roaring, the sound of human speech was shocking. Should be around here somewhere, the current patterns. I don't like this place. Something feels wrong. Male voices coming from the beach. Rescue other survivors. I crashed through the jungle, not caring about stealth anymore, hope surging through my chest like a drug. I burst onto the beach and saw them, 2 men in an inflatable raft, scanning the shoreline with binoculars. "Hey," I screamed, waving my arms, "hey, over here, help me." They spotted me immediately, and for one glorious moment I thought I was saved. The raft turned toward the beach, the motor buzzing as it cut through the waves. Then I looked at the sky, looked at the sun, and no, stop. I screamed, running toward the water. "Don't come, go back, it's almost sunset." But they couldn't hear me over the motor. Or maybe they thought I was delirious, that the sun didn't matter. They kept coming. their raft cutting through the surf toward the beach. The sun touched the horizon. I heard the rumble before I saw it. The creature rose from the water directly beneath their raft. What followed was nightmare. The raft capsized instantly, throwing both men into the water. I heard their screams, heard them calling for help, heard the awful sounds of something large moving through the water with terrible purpose. I stood on the beach, unable to move, unable to help, watching two men die in the dying light. One of them made it almost ashore. He was swimming desperately, blood streaming from wounds I couldn't see, when the creature surfaced behind him. Even from the beach, I could see the terror in his eyes. "Run," he gasped, his voice carrying across the water. "Run!" Then he was pulled under and he didn't surface again. The second man simply disappeared. One moment I could see him thrashing in the water. The next moment, he was gone. The water going still, as if nothing had happened. The creature emerged on the beach about 100 yards from where I stood. In the last light of day, I finally saw it clearly. It was humanoid in the way a nightmare is humanoid. Bipedal, with a torso and arms and a head, but wrong in every other way. Its skin was scaled and dark, dripping with seawater and blood. Its face was elongated, almost shark-like, with rows of teeth that gleamed white in the gloom. Those glowing eyes fixed on me. And for the first time, I saw what the family in the journal must have seen, what the men in the raft had seen. Death. Patient, inevitable death. It took a step toward me, then another. I ran. Day 14, the plan. 5 more days, 5 more nights of terror, of hiding, of wondering if this would be the night it finally found me. 5 more days of surviving while knowing that survival might be worse than the alternative. I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep running and hiding and hoping. Eventually, my luck would run out. Eventually, I'd make a mistake, and the creature would be there. So I had to change the equation. If I couldn't escape the island, if I couldn't get rescued, then I had to eliminate the threat. I had to kill it. The idea was insane, I knew that. I had a spear, a pocket knife, and desperation. It had size, strength, speed, and what seemed like an intimate knowledge of this island. But I also had something it didn't expect. I had watched it for 14 nights. I knew its patterns, I knew its territory, and I knew that it always returned to the water before dawn. The ocean was its home, but the ocean could also be its grave. I spent day 14 preparing. I built what I could only call a trap, though calling it that was generous. Using the rope from my supplies and the yacht, I created a web across the section of beach where the creature usually entered and exited the water. I tied pieces of metal and debris to the rope, creating noisemakers that would tangle it up, slow it down. I sharpened every piece of wood I could find into stakes, hardening the points in my campfire until they were nearly as hard as steel. I planted these in the sand at strategic points, angled toward the water, creating a kill zone. And I prepared myself. Mentally, physically, spiritually, this was it. Tonight, either the creature died, or I did. No more running, no more hiding. As sunset approached, I felt strangely calm. Fear was still there, cold and familiar in my gut, but it was manageable now. I'd been afraid for so long that it had become just another part of me, like hunger or thirst. I took my position behind a large piece of driftwood, spear in hand, flare gun in my belt. The sun sank lower. The water began to glow with that eerie bioluminescence I'd seen before, and the creature came. It rose from the waves like some ancient god of the deep, water streaming off its scaled hide. It took one step onto the beach, then another, moving with that horrible grace. Then it hit my trap. The ropes caught its legs, the metal debris clanging and jangling. It roared in surprise and rage, thrashing against the entanglement. Not enough to hold it, I knew, but enough to slow it down. I stood up, raised my spear, and screamed at it. "Come on! Come on, you bastard! I'm right here!" Those glowing eyes locked onto me. It tore through my trap like it was made of spider web, ropes snapping, debris scattering. It came at me in a rush, faster than anything that size should be able to move. I threw the spear with all my strength. It struck the creature in the shoulder, penetrating deep. The creature roared in pain and fury, stumbling but not stopping. I grabbed another sharpened stake from my pile and thrust it forward like a pike. The creature hit the stake, its own momentum driving the point deep into its chest. Black blood, darker than any blood I'd ever seen, flowed from the wound. The creature backpedaled, pulling free of the stake, ichor pouring onto the sand. It was hurt, actually hurt. For the first time I saw fear in those inhuman eyes, but it wasn't done. It circled me, breathing hard, bleeding, but still dangerous. So dangerous. I pulled out the flare gun, hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The creature saw the weapon and seemed to recognize the threat. It charged. I pulled the trigger. The flare struck it square in the face, exploding in a burst of red light and chemical fire. The creature shrieked, a sound so terrible I thought my eardrums would burst. It clawed at its face, staggering backward toward the water. I grabbed my longest stake, the one I'd been saving, and charged at it. Screaming, crying, driven by 14 days of pure terror, I drove that stake through the creature's chest with every ounce of strength I possessed. The creature fell backward into the waves, my stake jutting from its body. It tried to rise once, those eyes still glowing beneath the water, but the light was dimming, fading. It sank beneath the waves and didn't surface again. I stood at the water's edge, gasping for breath, covered in its dark blood and my own, unable to believe what had just happened, unable to believe I was still alive. The sun was coming up. First light, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful. So beautiful. I fell to my knees in the sand and wept. Day 21, rescue. 7 more days passed before the ship came. 7 days of healing, of making sure the creature was really dead, of preparing signals for any passing vessels. 7 days of slowly remembering what it felt like to not be afraid. The creature's body washed up on the 3rd day after the fight. It was even more massive than I'd thought, nearly 9 feet from head to foot. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to know what it was, or where it had come from. I only wanted to leave. On day 21, a research vessel spotted my signal fire. They found me sitting on the beach, thin and burned by the sun, but alive, so very alive. The rescue team asked me questions I couldn't answer. What had happened to the yacht? Where were the other passengers? What were those massive claw marks all over the beach? I told them about the shipwreck, about surviving alone, about using supplies from previous crash victims. I showed them the graves in the jungle, the 2 bodies in the wrecked yacht, the evidence of the raft team who'd tried to reach the island. I didn't tell them about the creature, didn't mention the monster that hunted when the sun set. They would have thought I was crazy, suffering from exposure and dehydration and stress. Maybe I was. Maybe none of it was real. But as the ship pulled away from the island, I looked back at that crescent of white sand and dark jungle, and I swear, just for a moment, I saw eyes glowing in the water, watching, waiting. Maybe I didn't kill it. Maybe I only killed one of them. Maybe the island is still waiting for its next visitor. I'm home now, safe, surrounded by people and lights and civilization. But every night as the sun sets, I find myself tensing, listening for that rumbling roar, expecting to see glowing eyes in the darkness. They say it takes time to recover from trauma. They say the fear will fade. But some part of me will always be on that island, will always be that person who learned what it's like to be prey,